back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for all right, and we are back.
Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth, and it's great to have you guys here on this Friday, July 19th. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. I was dealing with some camera issues, as you could see, prior to the broadcast. We've been having a good week, haven't really had any issues, but I think we're good. All right, so we're good to go now. We have a lot to talk about on the show today. I apologize for that. Before I get into that, just want to remind you guys, as always, to tip or donate, get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is gsmcpodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker at the bottom of the show segment down below. So, with that being said, let's get into what we are going to talk about today. So we're going to start off the show. We're going to talk about the AFC East. We're going to rank the quarterbacks within that division. So that will start us off here on this Friday. Then we'll talk about the Giants. Is there a disconnect between ownership and the front office? Because I know that was a topic that was discussed on the Colin Cowherd show, and he kind of had some comments on it. So I wanted to talk about it and give you my thoughts on it. Then in the third part of the show, we'll talk about Derek Carr's decision to sign with the Saints and why he chose the Saints over the Jets, because the Jets had interest in him as well. And, kind of go back to that and say, should the Jets have went and signed Derek Carr, or did they do the right thing and trade for Aaron Rodgers? So I'll get into that as well. Then we'll talk about C.J.Stroud, just his comments going into year two, his sophomore season. Some of the things that are different now in year two. So I'll get into that. And then in the final part of the show, we'll talk about Deshaun Watson and Amari Cooper. They've been working out together. Deshaun Watson was working his way back from his season-ending shoulder injury from last year, and Amari Cooper is looking for a new contract. So I just wanted to get into that as well. So again, apologize for a little bit of a late start today, but let's get into the first topic, which is talking about the AFC East and ranking the quarterbacks. So this one, again, it was kind of hard because, again, there's different ways in how you will rank quarterbacks. And again, I think this is, for me, I think this list, it's more so, again, how I feel like the player is going to perform. Not that I think, just you take two quarterbacks and you say this one's better than this one overall. I'll explain when we get to that point. But let's just say that ranking number 1 and number 4, those are the easiest. So at 4, I got Drake Maye / Jacoby Brissett. So we don't actually know who's going to be starting. It looks like, I think right now it seems like Jacoby Brissett's going to end up starting, and then I guess they'll transition into Drake Maye. So that's kind of why I got them at 4 at the moment. Now, I don't know how good Drake Maye is going to be at the NFL level. There are people that, of course, have an idea, but, until they step on the field and they start playing, we can't really evaluate them. They're going to play. He's going to play a little bit in the preseason, so we're going to, and that goes for all the rookies. We're going to see how they perform, but, it's, we can't really say anything just yet. And Jacoby Brissett, listen, we've seen him play, and he's kind of bounced around a little bit. Started out in New England, was with the Colts, was with the Browns, the Dolphins before that, was with the Commanders, and now he's back with the Patriots. And I think he's one of the better backup quarterbacks to have in the NFL. And he could definitely win you some games. So, I think the Patriots, they're taking that approach where they kind of want to ease him into it. And in the background of this photo I have here, You could see Bailey Zappi as well. So maybe, who knows? Maybe we'll see Zappi play a little bit this year as well. I mean, I don't think Patriot fans want to. I mean, I think you want to see Brissett, or you want to see all of Drake Maye. So, and Anthony Manzano is back in the chat today. He said, I really want to have faith in Tua this season, but the past 2 seasons of him just completely disappointing in terms of top performances at the end of the season has proven I can't trust him. And we will get into that in a little bit. So right now I have the Patriots at 4. Now, this is where it got difficult because, again, so this is who I have at 3, Aaron Rodgers. Okay, now, before you guys turn off the video and log off, this has to do with the current version of Aaron Rodgers that we have here. Now, I think the Jets are going to have a really good season. I think that they have a chance to win the division because of their roster, because of the defense, and with a healthy Aaron Rodgers, better protection, Breece Hall. There's a lot of factors into why I think the Jets are going to have a good year. Okay, again, going towards the storm. However, Aaron Rodgers at this current moment, okay, he's coming off of an injury, a significant injury, torn Achilles, okay? He is now 40 years old, all right? That's where this ranking comes in. Now, Aaron Rodgers would be, 2, or, I mean, it's, now with Josh Allen, it's, and we'll get to Josh Allen, but Aaron Rodgers would be ranked ahead of Tua. But I want to give Tua the respect, and I'll tell you why when we get to him. But I think Aaron Rodgers will have a good year. I don't think he's going to have an MVP-type season like he did, in 2020 and 2021. But I think he's going to be good enough that the Jets are really going to benefit from it, and it's going to propel them to hopefully the playoffs, which I envision, and I've been saying that all along. So that's why I have him at 3. That does not mean that I think overall I think Tua is better than Aaron Rodgers. Okay? I'm not saying that. But based off of last year, coming into this year, I'm putting Rodgers at 3. Just because he played 4 snaps and that was it. And he's coming off of that injury. So that's why he's at 3. And I think now when we get to Tua, listen, you got to give respect to Tua because led the league in passing yards, 29 touchdowns last season, had a good year. Now, to go back to your comment, Anthony, in the chat. So, I just want to reiterate what he said. He wants to have faith in Tua, but, he completely disappeared in terms of top performances at the end of the season. And that's why he can't trust him. Now, not last year, but the year before that, Tua dealt with a ton of injuries, particularly concussions. It was a rough season for him. The Dolphins still ended up making the playoffs, but, they ended up losing to the Bills. Skylar Thompson had to start that game. And, there were some question marks about Tua. Like, is this it? Is his career basically over after this? As my camera, decides to act up here. I guess the universe is trying to tell me something. But, I apologize for the camera issues, guys. It's just we were doing good all week, and now all of a sudden this decides to do this. But last year, Tua put together a solid year. Like I said, led the league in passing yards. And the other thing, too, is when we evaluate these guys is the supporting cast. Like, I think I would take Tua's supporting cast over Aaron Rodgers' supporting cast. Now, I think Breece Hall is probably better than all the running backs on Miami. I mean, Raheem Mostert had a great year, too. But, he's getting older. He's, in his 30s as a running back. So, and he has an injury history. So that's the other thing, too, is Tua's supporting cast is better than Aaron Rodgers' supporting cast. Because he's got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. You would take those pass catchers over what the Jets have. Garrett Wilson could be a stud. We just need to see him with a good quarterback. But I think, you would take Tua's supporting cast. So that's the other reason, too, is, the pass catchers are going to help Tua as well. But that's my opinion on that. But like Anthony's saying, at the end of the season, what's been the Dolphins' problem? They collapsed at the end of the year. Now, last year was bad because they had an opportunity to get the 2 seed and they got swept by Buffalo. They lose that tough game by 1 score, in Miami. And part of that is, because, one of the touchdowns got deflected up in the air and caught. Who caught it? I forget who the receiver that caught it. The Bills' touchdown. But because that happened a while ago. And then Deontay Hardy, I don't think it was him that caught the touchdown, but he ran back the kick or punt return, whichever one it was. But he ran it back for a touchdown. So there were some fluky plays there, and the Dolphins, they only put up 14 points. So, yeah, and they just couldn't beat the good teams last year. That's the other thing. And that's something that they're going to have to do if they're going to want to take it a step further this year. And Anthony also says in the chat, I agree with you. His supporting cast is one of the best in the AFC East, but they're elevating him instead of him. Listen, I have said that. If you go back and you listen and you watch some of the segments that I've done on the Dolphins, I say the exact same thing. Those guys elevate Tua. It's not the other way around. So, and then he also said, but when they get to the playoffs, they always bring up the cold weather against the Chiefs, forgetting Kansas City had to deal with that weather, and yet they were able to perform great. Well, the Chiefs are kind of used to playing in, they're not used to playing in that kind of, those kinds of temperatures, but, they're a cold weather team. And you know what? It's Kansas City. Kansas City can play anywhere because they've done it so many times. But that's my opinion on that. All right, so let's get to the number 1 spot, and it is going to be Mitchell Trubisky. No, I'm just kidding. If I can get back to the slideshow. Josh Allen. So the best quarterback in the division. It's going to be different this year because there's no Stephon Diggs. You got some new pieces on the offense when it comes to the receiver position. Chase Claypool, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, the rookie Keon Coleman, Mac Hollins, Curtis Samuel, who I think is going to be good. But, there are people that are saying the Bills are going to completely fall off. They're not going to be that good. And they did struggle during the season, don't get me wrong. But I think they're going to be okay. I think Josh Allen's going to still put together a good season. The other thing, too, is, of course, his ability to run with the football as well. I worry, later in his career that, he might end up like Cam Newton if he keeps taking punishment. But, we're not at that point yet. So, but you got to put Josh Allen at 1. You want to talk about, I think it's going to be different because when Stephon Diggs was first acquired, that made Josh Allen better. I feel like Josh Allen's a different quarterback than when he first started out. So I think the loss of Stephon Diggs, I don't think is going to be as significant as I think we would initially have thought. So, but just to reiterate now, so the Patriots quarterbacks at 4, Aaron Rodgers 3, Tua at number 2, and Josh Allen at 1. Let me know what you guys think about these rankings. How would you rank them? And Anthony in the chat said, as a Dolphins fan, I hate saying that about my quarterback, but it's facts. Listen, it's not like I want to root against Tua. I want Tua to do well. And you know what? He's a fellow southpaw. I'm a lefty too. So, those lefty quarterbacks are not very common. That's the other thing too. But, you got to be honest. Those guys elevate him. He doesn't elevate them. So, but yeah, that's my thoughts there. So we're going to take our first break of the show. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about the New York Giants. Is there a disconnect in the Giants organization? I just wanted to get into that and give you my thoughts. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the second part of the show, we're going to talk about the Giants and if there's a disconnect in the Giants organization. I wanted to get to Anthony's comments here while we were in break, just really quickly. So he said he's had conversations with Bills fans a ton, and they're worried losing Diggs. It's going to cause Josh to regress and back to what he was before Diggs. I don't think it's going to be exactly like that. Like I said before the break, I think Josh Allen's a different quarterback than he was back then. Now, I would be worried when it comes to the turnovers because that was happening even with Diggs. I think the loss of Brian Daboll has hurt Josh Allen, which people have talked about. But I think the loss of Diggs is not going to be as significant as it was because he just really wasn't making a huge impact on the offense down the stretch. I mean, he was having games where, like, they were winning games despite Diggs, having like 27 yards receiving in a game. So I don't think it's going to be as significant of a loss as I think we would have initially have thought. But we'll see. And then he said, where does this line of thinking from the media saying that Tua and Brock Purdy are the only quarterbacks smart enough to run this Shanahan and McDaniel system? Yeah, I mean, listen, you know what? It's a good point because, you look at Brock Purdy's supporting cast, right? If Brock Purdy ended up going to another team, let's say he went to the Giants, I said this recently, he would not be where he's at right now. You would really not know who Brock Purdy is. But he ended up in the perfect system. But you got to give him credit, though, because I think he's taken the 49ers to new heights. They've definitely played better offensively with him. Now, you could also say they have Christian McCaffrey as well, which I've also brought up. With Garoppolo, like the first time they went to the Super Bowl with Garoppolo, they didn't have McCaffrey. Mostert, ran for 200 yards against the Packers, but it is interesting. They are kind of in that same conversation. But the difference is, Brock Purdy's made it to NFC Championship games and a Super Bowl. Tua has not done that. So, I don't know. It really is. It's tough. It's a tough conversation to have. But, Hawaiian 5-0 is in the chat. Welcome back. Aloha. Good morning, my friend. Let's go Pittsburgh Steelers. My dad is a Steelers fan. So, listen, we'll see what the Steelers can do this year. It's going to be interesting with Russell Wilson as the quarterback and if they end up going to Fields at some point. All right, so we kind of getting off track because, we got to talk about the Giants now. But, yeah, so I wanted to talk about, is there a disconnect in the Giants organization? Because Colin Cowherd on his show recently said that there is. And this is what he had to say recently on his show. I watched the Giants here, and there's a disconnect between owner and GM, and I'm uncomfortable watching it. Okay, he said John Mara is sitting there on the table, and this is before Saquon Barkley in free agency left for the rival Eagles, and Mara is just really uncomfortable with the star Saquon Barkley going to rival Philadelphia. That's really bad. The owner's not happy. Joe Schoen is smiling like it's really uncomfortable. The one thing I do know about being a general manager, you got to have some sort of relationship with the owner that's comfortable. You have to trust the owner. You got to be able to read your owner's temperament. See, here's the thing. I understand what he's saying there, but I think Joe Schoen did the right thing. I think the Giants did the right thing. I feel like, Colin Cowherd, a lot of the national media, I feel like they just think the Giants are just completely lost in what they're doing. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just me, being from the East Coast and being a fan. But, I'll be critical of the Giants when I have to be. I don't really think there's a disconnect like they're saying. Why? Because Saquon Barkley, in the show, John Mara talks about how, Saquon Barkley, people are constantly buying his jerseys. He's the star of the team. And, he's at the top when it comes to, jersey sales and things like that. I understand that. But here's the thing. Ultimately, what was the better decision for the team? Was it to overpay for a 27-year-old running back when you have so many other needs, or address those other needs and, try to find a replacement for him just so you can at least have a running game this year. I think the Giants did the right thing. And you know what? They went to Barkley's agent. They went to Barkley. They said, test the market, let us know, and we'll tell you if we'll match it or not. And it got to a certain point where JioSaavn was not going to go the extra mile for it, and they backed out. And Saquon ended up going to the Eagles. And you know what? Saquon didn't really want to be with the Giants as much as people may have thought. And you know what? Good for him that he goes to a better team at the expense of, it's a division rival. It's a team that, the Giants, their fans do not like. But it was better for Saquon to leave than to stay. Now, if you want to go back to when they were negotiating with Daniel Jones and Saquon, yeah, maybe you should have prioritized keeping Saquon long-term as opposed to Daniel Jones. Unfortunately, the worst thing that could have happened for the Giants was Daniel Jones winning that playoff game against the Vikings, because that forced them to say, you know what? Hey, that was really good. Let's sign him. Not, let's, let's evaluate him after the Eagles playoff game when they, got destroyed. So, unfortunately, as great as seeing the Giants win a playoff game for the first time in a while, that also hurt them, because that made them say, all right, well, we could pay Daniel Jones. So, I don't know. It's tough, but I don't think there's this disconnect, because here's the other thing. John Mara, he had his handprints on the Eli Manning situation. Like, they felt like they did Eli wrong when Geno Smith started for him, and Ben McAdoo and the coaching staff, they benched him. Well, actually, I think that was also part of the front office, too. They benched Eli Manning. They started Geno Smith. Then John Mara wanted to do right by Eli, and they wanted to try to, build this team up and try to, compete for a championship. Well, the Giants were nowhere near that because, 2018, they weren't very good. 2019, then they drafted Daniel Jones. So they didn't really help Eli there. I don't know. I think it's better that John Mara, takes a step back and he lets JioSaavn and his staff figure it out. Because, again, the Giants have so many other issues. I think losing Saquon, they could afford it. Because the offensive line, when's the last time the Giants have had a good offensive line? It's been years. It's been years. Even when they won the Super Bowl in 2011, their offensive line was not good. Like, the rankings of it. I mean, of course, they got their act together because, they won a championship. But, it's been years since they've had an offensive line. They're trying to build this team the right way. And that starts up front. The offensive line and the defensive line. And the defensive line is something, as a Giant fan, you have to be excited for. Brian Burns with Dexter Lawrence and Kayvon Thibodeau. And you're hoping they could wreak havoc. And you know what? Maybe offensively the Giants might not be a top offense, but if the defense could give them short fields, turn the ball over, who knows? And this is me being optimistic with the Giants. They have been a laughingstock for a long time. So, I don't know. I don't agree with this. There's a disconnect. I think the Giants have an idea of what they want to do. Now, the problem is the quarterback position. If Daniel Jones goes out there and plays really well, that is going to solve a lot of problems. But if he ends up not playing well, I don't know what's going to happen. Because I do think that JioSaavn and Brian Daboll can get it done. I think part of it was they just inherited a mess with this team. And they really, and ultimately they could pay the price for it, but they're trying to turn it around. And I feel like they're slowly but surely doing that. But now we're going into year 3 and got to see results. So we'll see what happens. But in the chat, though, we did get some comments while I went off on that spiel. Anthony said, I think there's a giant disconnect in that organization. The ownership wants to stay with Daniel Jones, but the GM and coach want to move on from Daniel. It's part of it, but you know what? I think if Joe Shane wants to move off of Daniel Jones after this season, I don't think John Mara is going to step in. The problem is we're now in 2024. Daniel Jones was drafted in 2019. And we're still talking about, oh, is he the guy? Is he not the guy? If we're still having those conversations now, what does that tell you? It's probably not the guy. Now, I'll give Daniel Jones this. He has gone through a lot. You went from Pat Shurmur to Joe Judge to Brian Dable, Gettleman to now Joe Shane. I mean, it's just that's tough for a player. And it's just they really have never surrounded him with a lot of talent. I feel like there is some talent on this Giants offense. I feel like the pass catchers that he has, he could grow with them. But he's got to prove it. And I think Daniel Jones does have ability, but I just don't think he's the guy. He's another one where I just think you want a quarterback that's going to elevate you. I don't think he's that guy. I think running with the football, that makes him dangerous, but it's just, I'm sorry. It's just, at this point, I think he's not the guy. And I feel bad because, he seems like a nice guy. You want to see him succeed, but it's just, we got to pull the plug. But you know what? If he goes out there and proves everybody wrong, I'll be happy with that. Hawaiian says, thanks for Justin. Not since Lawrence Taylor rolling on the floor laughing. And then Sal in the chat says, if Dable can't save him, nobody can. I mean, listen, if he ended up on, I don't know. Let's say he ended up being Brock Purdy's backup, and Brock Purdy got hurt. I mean, if he's throwing to Kittle and Debo and Ayuk, and, well, we don't know about Ayuk, and McCaffrey, I think Daniel Jones would look good in the 49ers offense. I really would. It's just, the Giants wasn't the best situation for him to end up in. First of all, I mean, when you hear a quarterback being drafted from Duke, you're thinking, my friend has a funny video of him reacting to it. You think of Duke, you think of a basketball school. You don't think of football, but that's just what ended up happening. So, it is what it is, but I don't think there's this disconnect like people think. I think there was a disconnect between, the previous regimes, but I think here, Joe Shane and Brian Dable, I think, have an idea. So, I don't know. That's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think about that. But before we go to break again, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to go to the following link. That is GSMCpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Again, that is GSMCpodcast.net. And as always, it is displayed on the ticker at the bottom of the show segment down below. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about Derek Carr, why he chose the Saints over the Jets. We'll get into that. And we'll also talk about, do the Jets regret not bringing in Derek Carr and trading for Aaron Rodgers? We'll get into that conversation when we come back. Don't want to miss that. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the third part of the show, we are going to talk about Derek Carr, why he chose the Saints over the Jets. So let's get into that conversation. So Derek Carr did, have a visit with the Jets, and prior to signing with the Saints. But this is what he had to say. He said, "I could have signed with New York." This is on Pardon My Take, the Pardon My Take podcast. He said, "It just wasn't the right time for me. There were still like 4 or 5 teams I had to hear from. I remember sitting there with Robert Saleh, the Jets coach, and he's like, look, man, we'd love to have you. It's up to you. But, of course, that ended up not happening. And so Carr had already visited with the Saints before. This is in the article on NFL.com. He had already visited with the Saints before he took the trip to New Jersey to meet with Saleh and the Jets. But he ultimately chose Dennis Allen and the Saints. And I'll be honest, I think, there were a lot of Jet fans that wanted Derek Carr. I know, some of my family, they wanted Derek Carr. But when I heard that there was a possibility that that they could get Aaron Rodgers, the Jets, I said, just go after Aaron Rodgers. But, people are like, oh, no, it's too much of a head case. I said, well, if I still think he's the best option. Now, that brings up the conversation now. And Hawaiian 50 says, everyone, please don't forget to smash that like button for this legend, for all your information. I appreciate that. For all your information, my guy. I appreciate that. And you also said, got another nephew, just got drafted in the first round for the Saints. I bet you can guess who it is by the name rolling on the floor laughing. Yeah, so, no, I appreciate the comments. I appreciate the comments today, really, because, I'll be honest, there are times this offseason where, you're struggling to figure out, what are you going to talk about? We had the draft, we had free agency, we had all these things, but it's just, there's really some parts where you're just like, man, it's a slow day, but we're getting closer to the start of the season, well, at least preseason, so that's good. We can see that. That's in sight. But anyways, so, again, I just keep going off topic, but do the Jets regret trading for Aaron Rodgers instead of signing Derek Carr? Well, Derek Carr chose the Saints. So Derek Carr was probably the first option. And when that didn't work out and they had a chance to get Rodgers, and they went and did it. Now, again, for me, when you have a guy that was coming off of a year removed from back-to-back MVPs, okay, because there was that 2022 season in between all of this, okay, we can't forget about that. And that was brought up in our production meeting recently. And, before I spoke on the matter, I did say RELAX, but that was kind of a joke. Rodgers had a down 2022 season. His last full season in Green Bay was not an Aaron Rodgers type season. He threw double-digit interceptions. He didn't have a game where he threw over 300 yards, which, that doesn't happen. But I think there's some factors into that because he had all these like rookie receivers that he had to work with, like Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs. Like he had to, build a rapport up with them. And I don't want to make excuses for him, but I'm just, throwing that out there. And then also, let's not forget, he hurt his thumb in the London game against the Giants. I think it was on the last play of the game. So there were some factors, I think, that contributed to his down year. And then if you remember, the Packers did get hot towards the end of the year, and they almost made the playoffs, but then, kneecaps and the Lions were like, not so fast. We got nothing to play for, which means you got nothing to play for because we're going to knock you out of the playoffs right now. Which I was kind of upset the Lions didn't make the playoffs in 22 because I feel like they deserved it. But, it's how tiebreakers. Seattle beat them earlier in the season, and that's how they got in. But anyways, and the Lions got to the NFC Championship game last year, so, it didn't take long. But anyways, yeah, 2022 was a down year for Rodgers. But then coming into last year, the Jets, maybe a better equipped team in terms of, the players. We never got to see it. Rodgers was done in 4 plays, and it's been a tailspin ever since. The Jets with the quarterbacks they had to trot out there every week. And just all the extracurricular stuff with Rodgers, I'm not going to get into it because, but you guys know what I mean. He could have been sworn into office. No, that wasn't going to happen. But it's just, again, when I heard that story, I just, and again, there's no one way or the other with it. Just hearing that. But I think the idea of him playing in a championship game and then also, like, being sworn into office. Like, just the thought of all that happening around the same time, like, I just thought that was really funny. But, yeah, it's... Aaron Rodgers is a different dude than he was 10 years ago. I don't know what happened, but it's just... That's where we're at now. But anyways... Yeah, it's tough. Because, yeah, you could say, with everything that's happened, you could say, yeah, I mean, the Jets should have got Derek Carr. Well, how did we know that Aaron Rodgers was going to hurt himself 4 plays into the season? We had no idea that was going to happen. No idea. And Derek Carr, I mean, he was coming off of a down year in 22 as well. And Derek Carr turns the ball over more than Aaron Rodgers does. Derek Carr would definitely throw interceptions in big games. Look at how he played with the Saints last year at times. He was inconsistent. You know, Rodgers is not a guy that's going to put the ball in harm's way. But yeah, Rodgers was getting older. And you know what? Rodgers, you know, for a while stayed healthy. You know, he was playing. You know, this was the first significant injury for him since, you know, the collarbone when he missed time. Now, it was like the 2018 opener against the Bears he got hurt, and you thought, oh my God, he's going to be out for the year again. But no, that didn't happen. He played. You know, he stayed healthy. So, you know, yeah, you thought maybe, but he's been staying healthy. So I didn't really expect him to, well, maybe expect him to get banged up, but not first game of the year, 4 plays into the first game. But that happened. That happened, unfortunately. And, you know, it's unfortunate. You know, it really is, because you wanted to see what he could do. And we didn't get a chance to see that. But we are going to get a chance to see it this year. I think we have to see how this season goes. Because I think if it ends up being the same as it was last year, where Rodgers goes down early and that derails the Jets' whole season, and then everybody's gone, you know, Joe Douglas, Nathaniel Hackett, Robert Saleh, Rodgers probably gone, then yeah, you would say it's a failure. And you probably should have signed Derek Carr if you had the chance to. But Derek Carr chose the Saints over the Jets. So, yeah, then you probably go back and say, yeah, we shouldn't have done this. But I think it's still early, even though, like, a lot has happened. In the chat, Hawaiian says, I think the quarterbacks nowadays are having harder time because of the defense of other teams are animals. Well, I mean, it depends on what defense you're going up against. You know, because not every defense is good. You know, I mean, yeah, you go up against, like, the 49ers defense, or, you know, the Steelers or the Ravens, how they were last year. The Browns. You know, yeah, I mean, you go up against some of these better defenses with these, you know, star players on the defensive line, like Nick Bosa and T.J. Watt and Myles Garrett. Yeah, it's, you know. But, you know, the reason why Aaron Rodgers got hurt last year was because of the protection. And I don't know what kind of, like, you know, was he in... Well, he had that calf injury, and that could have led to the Achilles injury. But also, I think, because everybody has complained about the turf at MetLife, that could have played a factor. Because if you remember from 2020, the Jets were playing the 49ers, and Nick Bosa tore his ACL. There were a few players that got hurt. A few defensive linemen got hurt in the game against the Jets. Nick Bosa tore his ACL in 2020, I believe. It was like that week. It was week 2. I think it was like early on in the season. But yeah, like, players got hurt on that turf. Like, many people have complained about the turf at MetLife. But yeah, you got that, and you got, you know, the offensive line for the Jets. The protection on that play that Rodgers got hurt on, it didn't, you know, it was horrendous. And we talked about the 49ers and, you know, Rodgers getting hurt. Well, Leonard Floyd, who sacked him on that play that led to his injury, is on the 49ers. And they're going to be playing on Monday night. So, you know, if you're a Jet fan or if you're a Rodgers fan, you're going to be covering your eyes every time Rodgers drops back to throw it. Because you're like, oh, God, please don't get hit. Please. I can't take it. But it's just, I'm just hoping he gets through the first game. Because I think after that, the Jets have a doable schedule. And shout out to TJ, who does the sports podcast. He was breaking down the Jets. A lot of things with the Jets, actually. Went over their rankings in their categories from last year. Then went over the schedule. He has the Jets going 8-9. I forget what I had the Jets. What did I say? Did I say 11 wins? 11, 12 wins? Around there. So you might look at TJ's prediction of the Jets as being more realistic as opposed to me. So we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, I think it's too early to decide whether the Jets made the wrong move trading for Aaron Rodgers. I think a lot of people say yes because of how it's gone. Let's see how this year goes, because if he gets hurt again and he's out for an extended period of time and the Jets season goes nowhere, then we could say, yeah, it was a failure. But if the Jets have a good year, they make the playoffs, and maybe go on a deep playoff run, then got to change our tune a little bit. And then as for Derek Carr, I mean, he finished the season strong last year. See, if the Jets got that version of Derek Carr, and I mean, if they had Derek Carr at all last year, playing the full season, the Jets probably make the playoffs. It's just, they didn't have a backup plan when Aaron Rodgers got hurt. So, I don't know. It's tough to decide right now, but that's my thoughts. So, we'll see how Derek Carr does. We'll see how Aaron Rodgers does. And I think this season will define whether it was a failure or not that the Jets traded Rodgers. I'm not going to say it yet because he's playing this year. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people. You have the right to not be optimistic because the Jets have had a rough stretch. It's been longer than a rough stretch, but let's see what happens. It's right there in front of them, as Aaron Boone likes to say. Hawaiian also says, you're right, offensive line. If Steelers had a better one, I think we would have took the Super Bowl. Well, they put an emphasis on the offensive line in the draft, so we'll see. And then he also said, if it was my choice, I would sign 8 big sumo wrestlers for my offensive line for the Steelers. Yeah, but they got to learn the proper technique, too, when it comes to blocking. I mean, you could be a big guy, but you got to be able to be a little. I gotta have some movement, and I mean, not saying they don't, but yeah. But I agree though. Anyways, so we're gonna take our next break. When we come back, we'll talk about C.J.Stroud. Just some recent comments he made. Going into year 2 as the Texans starter. Talk about what he had to say when we come back from break. So stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we are going to talk about C.J.Stroud. Just some recent comments that he made about going into year 2, coming off an impressive rookie season. Texans, a team I'm high on going into the season, and they're looking to do bigger things in year 2. So let's get into what Stroud had to say. He said, definitely a little more confident just knowing how training camp works, the reps I'll take. Going with the ones. Last year, I really didn't know that until the very beginning of the season. So right now, it's just trying to not only build a camaraderie, but also be a leader with the first team, so the second and the third, and everybody who's watching, that this is the standard. It's up to me to set the standard, and I have to do that every day. Let's see. There's a ton of things. Owning the offense more, the operation, putting more on my plate with run checks and protection checks, things like that. The message is just keep the main thing the main thing. Of course, we have not only a lot of expectations. We have a lot of big goals on this team. That's how it should be. The person that always doubts himself will probably never make it. So you have to have confidence and a goal and a plan and execute that plan. That's what we're doing, and really you need to be where your feet are. We're in training camp right now. We've got to just execute that and making sure we're taking every day to get better. So a lot to say there from Stroud. And Hawaiian in the chat says, I live in Houston and never been to one Texans game. I think you should be. He said, I have a bunch of C.J.Stroud rookie cards. Let's go. I mean, I think that's a team that you should try to, make it out to a game and watch, because I think they're going to be very exciting to watch. But yeah, some comments there. And, it's kind of like the same thing when I talked about Jordan Love, in the Packers offense. Like, now they're in year 2. Now it's all about, advancing and, modifying the offense. Now you kind of got an idea. You went through it for a full year. Now let's go to stage 2 now. And that's kind of like with Stroud and the Texans. Went through it his rookie season, now has a kind of a better idea, better understanding of how everything works. And I think, he's going to go out there and have a good year. However, I did bring this up the other day, but when I was having a conversation with one of my friends, they said they felt like this could be a regression year for the Texans. He talked about Diggs and how, Diggs has kind of been a locker room problem. If he's not getting the ball like he should be, and in this offense, Diggs is not going to get all the targets. The ball is going to be spread around between the pass catchers. He brought up Tank Dell's injury, because Tank Dell, got hurt during the season, and then, then what happened later on? Recovering from a gunshot wound after that. So it's just, he's been through a lot. So you don't know how he's going to bounce back on top of the injury that he suffered, during the year. And I don't know. He just said that he feels like it's going to be a regression year for Stroud. Now, I didn't say this, but what I thought about it was, here's the thing. There were times where the Texans did struggle on the road. They lost to the Panthers. That was think about that. The Panthers were not good last year. Record-wise, they were one of the worst teams in football, and they beat the Texans. That was one of their wins. And then, you see how the Ravens performed the Texans performed in the playoff game against the Ravens. That was a hostile environment, colder temperatures. Yeah, they didn't play that well. So that's one thing I want to keep an eye on, is the Texans playing road games this year. Now, obviously, when they played in Indianapolis, they're playing in a dome, and that was a close game that they ended up winning. But I want to see how Stroud performs in that weather this year, because I know there was a couple games. I mean, I forget when the Texans game or the Panthers game was. That was earlier in the year, but the Ravens game was in late January. So that's something that I do want to keep an eye on this year, is seeing how does Stroud and that Texans team perform in colder temperatures. But I still think that I think this team is way too talented. I just think they have the right head coach in place with DeMeco Ryans. I think they kind of know how to approach this year. They're back to square one. Now, I know they were saying, I forget who said it. I think one of the players said we're now, one of the teams that are going to be hunted. I don't know. I feel like you still kind of got to earn you got to earn it. Because now they did go on the road and beat the Bengals last season. Let's not forget about that. They did do that. I don't know. Maybe it's just because they it was against the Ravens, who were the best team at that point. And, it was going to be hard for them to win in that environment against that team. So maybe it's just that. But I don't know. I want to see how Stroud... Because, balled out in Jacksonville against the Jags, and they won by a few scores against Trevor Lawrence and the Jags early on in the season. But we'll see. But yeah, I feel like they got to earn it. They got to earn being the hunties, the ones that are being hunted. I don't know. And, we'll see how they do against teams like the Bills and against the Chiefs later on in the season. We're going to see Mahomes against Stroud, Josh Allen against Stroud, and let's see if maybe this time around they home game for the Texans. And that game's on Christmas, I believe. Yeah. So that should be a very good game. Yeah, because, again, how it's set up, you have the Steelers playing the Ravens, and then the Texans playing the Chiefs, and that is the Saturday before Christmas, and then Christmas falls on a Wednesday this year, so then you have the Chiefs and the Steelers early on, and then you have the Texans and the Ravens after that. So maybe third time's a charm for Stroud. Can he beat Lamar? Because last year went up against Lamar twice, went 0-2. So we will have to wait and see. But yeah, I don't know if I see a regression. I see improvement. I see Stroud, maybe being an MVP candidate. But you know what? It definitely is a interesting to hear different takes on things, because yeah, not everybody's going to say the same thing. So I just thought that was interesting that he said that the Texans could be in for a regression year. I mean, Stroud had 23 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, and a very impressive touchdown-interception ratio. But let's see the touchdown. Let's see him increase in touchdowns. Let's see him get to 30-plus touchdowns. And he passed for over 4,000 yards, 4,108 passing yards. So, I mean, passing yards probably still get around 4,000, maybe get over that. And I think he could definitely get more than 23 touchdowns. I think he definitely can. But yeah, only threw 5 picks last year. And that's something that you want to have. You want to have a quarterback that, I mean, it's, yeah, thanks for telling me that. What I was going to say was, you want to have a quarterback that, is not throwing a ton of picks, keeping the, taking care of the football. No, what I was going to say is thanks, Captain Obvious, because I know somebody's probably watching this is probably going to say that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't really see it, but I do understand, because I've said it too. Yeah, Diggs, how is he going to react when Stroud's throwing a Tank Dell a bunch of times, and Nico Collins and Dalton Schultz and Joe Mixon and whoever else is running the football? If Dameon Pierce has a role on this team, how is he going to feel when there's other guys that are contributing and he really isn't at times? So that is, I agree though, that is definitely something that we got to look closely at, because again, left Minnesota, left Buffalo, so there's he's a common denominator in that regard. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm really excited for what the Texans can do. That is a team that you should be trying to watch as many games with them as possible, because they are going to be, that offense is going to be fun to watch. And with the defense, Will Anderson Jr. in year 2, they added Danielle Hunter. Let's see how this defense is now. Right now I look at them as the AFC South favorites. So I don't think my friend said if he thought the Texans were still going to win the division, or if he thought somebody else was, because that division is going to be tougher. I mean, the Colts, I think they're not going anywhere. Anthony Richardson, full year. You got the Jags. And then I feel bad for the Titans, because everybody, I feel like, discounts them. But I don't know. We'll see. Depends on how Will Levis does. I've said this a million times. Hawaiian 5-0 says, over 25 touchdowns for C.J.Stroud this upcoming year. Yeah, I think he should get in the 30s. I mean, with these pass catchers, I think he should. I think he should get in the 30s. It was just like a down year for quarterbacks statistically when it comes to the touchdowns, because nobody got into the 40s. That was a year, and I've said it, that was a year that you give that award to a non-quarterback, whether it was Tyreek Hill or Christian McCaffrey. Tyreek Hill got hurt towards the end of the year, so that hurt his chances, but it should have been either Tyreek Hill or Christian McCaffrey that should have got the MVP. And I know Dak played well, Brock Purdy, Lamar Jackson, who won it, of course. But that was the year to change it up. And it didn't happen. So if it didn't happen then, when is it going to happen? So it's a quarterback award. I do agree that they kind of have to change it up. Maybe. But I don't know. That's just my opinion. So let me know what you guys think about that, though. Should they, you got MVP and then maybe you have another award as well, because it's just, there's been constant debates about that. So, and I think C.J.Stroud will be an MVP candidate. There's no reason why he shouldn't be. I mean, I'm very optimistic about the Texans. But we will see. We will see. So, we're going to take our final break of the show now. And then when we come back, we will talk about the Cleveland Browns. We'll talk about Deshaun Watson's rehab, as well as Amari Cooper and his contract situation, because he wants a new contract. So, a couple of players on the Browns that we'll discuss. And that will take us to the end of the show for today and right into the weekend. So for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we're just going to talk about a couple players on the Cleveland Browns. I know we've talked about the Browns a handful of times this offseason. Deshaun Watson, as well as Amari Cooper. Because, you have Deshaun Watson working his way back from the injury that he suffered last season, as well as, Amari Cooper looking for a new contract. So Deshaun Watson talked about some things, so I just wanted to address that. And so this is what he had to say, talking about his connection with Amari Cooper. He's been throwing with Cooper over the summer, and they remain in frequent contact, and he's going to be the top target. Anyways, he said the connection's been awesome, me and Amari. Even with all the other guys, it's not like he's missed a beat. Amari's always been there. We know what he can do. He's shown that over the offseason, the brotherhood, the love, the communication, none of that stuff has missed a beat at all. And he said it's been a blessing being able to sit back, recollect everything that's been going on, to be able to start from scratch, build that foundation. I don't get frustrated or anything like that. There's other things in life that can frustrate you. This is a blessing to continue to play the game of football and have the people that want you to succeed. For me, to even be back throwing the football is my top point that I've been locked in with. So, yeah. So he's been, he's been working out with Amari Cooper. And the Browns have confidence that they're going to get a deal done with him. So that's not a major concern. I don't think it's a Brandon Ayuk situation right now. But yeah, so Amari Cooper did skip mandatory minicamp in June. He's wants that contract extension. And there's a concern he might miss the starting of training camp. But he's still been working out with Deshaun Watson. And I've talked about, some comments that Andrew Berry, the general manager, made about Amari Cooper, and that, they're not going to give you the specifics on what's going on, but they have confidence that they're going to get a deal done at some point, and Amari Cooper is going to be on the field with the Browns, once they, take the field officially in the regular season for the first time when Amari Cooper plays against his former team, the Dallas Cowboys. So that should be fun. Tom Brady, Kevin Burkhardt on the call that day. But yeah, it seems there is a sense of optimism with Deshaun Watson and how he's going to bounce back this year. That, the injury is going to be behind him, and he's going to be ready to roll. And he's another guy that's been a disappointment since he was traded over. And there's a lot that's happened, between when he first got to the Browns and the last game that he played with the Texans. And that's never going to go away. But now he's back on the football field, and let's see what he does. And I don't know. I'm not very optimistic that he's going to return to the Deshaun Watson from, when he was making the playoffs with the Texans. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think you'll get a Deshaun Watson that I think is good enough that the Browns could get by and, be a team that's in contention. But I don't know if we're going to get the Deshaun Watson from, when the Texans are making the playoffs, like I said. The Browns have a good team around him. You got Amari Cooper there. You got Jerry Jeudy. We'll see how he is now in his with his new team. Elijah Moore, David Njoku. The running game with Nick Chubb coming back. The video of him, lifting weights. He looks like he's ready to go. And the offensive line hopefully stays intact behind a good defense. The Browns have a lot of talent on this team, and that showed because, despite the injuries at quarterback, they still, made the playoffs. Made the playoffs starting 5 different quarterbacks. So, and the Browns, they came off of a big win against the Ravens. I think that was the last game Deshaun Watson played. So, if he can come back and, not turn the ball over, not put it in harm's way, Browns are going to be good. Also, appreciate the comment by Hawaiian 50 once again. Everybody make sure you're subscribed to this legend, one of the best sports talk shows on YouTube. I appreciate that. Those are very strong comments, but I appreciate it. All right, we're trying to get to that point. I appreciate the comments. I wouldn't call myself a legend. Listen, I'm just doing these shows for my bedroom. But that's how legends are made. As Babe Ruth said in The Sandlot, heroes are remembered, but legends never die. So hopefully I get to that point. I don't know. I just when I saw Legend, that's where my mind went, was the Sandlot, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah. Did you think I was going to bring up the Sandlot today? Probably not. That probably wasn't on your bingo card. But I would say, my camera, glitching out on me, me holding back a sneeze, those should be on your bingo cards, because those happen. Now, thankfully, knock on wood, a sneeze has not happened, or I haven't had to hold back a sneeze at all today, which is good. But I appreciate that, sharing you out to my Facebook and Discord. I appreciate that. But let's not forget, though, we got other shows here on the network. We cover pretty much every sport. So also make sure to advertise the other shows as well. Give them some love, like I always say. try to spread the wealth. But no, I appreciate that, really. Appreciate the comments today. We got a lot of comments, but that's what makes these shows. That's what makes these shows the best, is when you have the interactions with the viewers. Because, yeah, I mean, obviously I have my topics that I'm going to discuss, but, at times you want to have some discussion. You want to talk about things with people, so it's not just, me talking to the void, as I like to say. And we did get a lot of comments today from, a couple of you guys that have been in the chats. We got you guys are kind of like the Hawaiian 5-0 and Anthony Manzano. You guys have been kind of like the regulars at times. You've been in the chat a couple times now over the last month or so. Anthony more recently, but Hawaiian, you have been in the chat a few times prior to this. So, that's what it's about interacting with the viewers, and I want to continue to do that because that's what makes the shows better. So, but we still got some time left here, but with the Browns, back to the segment here. I mean, this is a team that I have talked about a lot over the course of the offseason, and they play in a tough division. And we will actually, on Monday, we will be ranking the quarterbacks within that division, which is going to be an interesting ranking, to say the least, which is going to be a tough ranking. That one's going to be tough, too, especially when it comes to the 1 and 2 spots, because you could go either or. But, the AFC North will be on Monday. So, we'll see where Deshaun Watson ends up getting ranked. What was I going to say? Yeah, I was going to bring up rankings again. It's hard. It is hard to do rankings. I watched a segment on the Pat McAfee show yesterday, and they were talking about ranking quarterbacks, and they were just... They were talking about the supporting cast for quarterbacks, and Pat McAfee brought up, when Andrew Luck was the quarterback, and he said, he gave a hypothetical. He said if he shanked a punt, gave a team good field position, and they ended up scoring because of it, and the Colts lost, that loss would be on Andrew Luck. That's when in reality it's not. And football is the ultimate team sport. And that's why, doing these rankings, it's hard because, you got guys like Brock Purdy and Tua, who we talked about earlier today, where they got great supporting casts, and a lot of people think that those supporting casts elevate them, not the other way around. But, they had good seasons. Tua led the league in passing yards, threw 29 touchdowns. But would you rank him over... Would you rank Tua over... Well, I had Tua ranked over Aaron Rodgers, but that's because Aaron Rodgers didn't play last year. So that's why my rankings were the way they were. But I think, if you just rank those two blindly, didn't look at their stats from last year, and you just looked at their overall body of work, yeah, you're going to put Aaron Rodgers over Tua, of course. So that's why... It's interesting with the ESPN rankings of the top 10s of all the different positions and coaches list. Well, coaches is different, but with players, yeah, it's about your supporting cast too. It's not just stats; it's who you're surrounded by, your wins and losses. It's everything. Everything is factored in. So, and we'll see how many wins the Browns get as we. I went off on a tangent towards the end once again. But we'll see how many wins the Browns get this upcoming season. But that is it for the show for today. I apologize for the late start. Had some camera issues, but we ended up making it through. And things are well. I hope everybody has a good weekend. Enjoy it. We'll be back on Monday. Make sure to check out all the other shows, like I always say. We really appreciate that. So, yeah, that is all the time that we have for today. Again, enjoy the weekend. We'll be back again, once again, on Monday. same time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. And until then, I'm Kenneth Grunfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys on Monday. Take care and have a good weekend.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that great.